Hi everybody, my name is David, and today I will be doing the lecture on the Delpit article, part 3, titled The Politics of Teaching Literate Discourse. I have created a PowerPoint that will go through the main information that was found in the article. That will be provided to you in addition to this video, which will be posted on YouTube, and I'll provide a link for it. Please follow along with the PowerPoint as I'm speaking. Majority of the information that you need will be in the PowerPoint, but I will be providing examples through the video, so it's important that you read through the PowerPoint, but also listen to the video as well, because you will gain some additional information from the video. So first I'm going to go ahead with the first slide, provide a brief overview of the article. The majority of it, the beginning chunk of it, is Delpit critiquing one of her colleagues' work, Guy, his theories on discourse. Guy believes that discourse cannot be taught in a classroom setting. However, Delpit argues that it can and is taught within classrooms. Additionally, in her article, she does provide ways for teachers to teach discourse explicitly to students. So you may be asking, what is discourse? And it is a topic that I think a lot of us are somewhat familiar with, but we aren't really totally sure of exactly what it is. I wasn't really too clear on what it was before I read the article. However, Guy states this: it is constructed as something of an identity kit, ways of saying, writing, doing, being, valuing, and believing. Discourses generally exist within the same language, and they vary based on economic class, race, region, and setting. I'm going to give a few examples of this, but to kind of put it in perspective, there's things like medical discourse, academic discourse, your home discourse, things like that. So what does this really mean? I think the best way that I can help you understand what a discourse is take, for example, if you were moving to, say you're an English-speaking individual and you're moving to Germany. In order to participate meaningfully in that community, in that culture, in that region, wherever you may be, you have to know German. In order to receive an education in Germany, you have to know German. In order to access social services, you have to know German. In order to reach economic success, you have to know German. You just have to. In order to do anything in a new country that has a different language than what you originally speak, you have to learn that discourse, that language. That's kind of what discourse is. So another example of this, so imagine that there are a group of 3 people who are all English speakers. One's a doctor, one is a stay-at-home mom who's African American and in the middle class, another is a white middle class mechanic. And they can all understand the words that are being said, they all speak English, but they all utilize different discourses. So the doctor would likely utilize an academic or medical language base that the mother and the mechanic may not know, may not be able to pick up on, may not be comfortable with. And the mechanic may utilize language that is more technical and more different than what the doctor would use and what the mother may be using. And the mother may speak in a more casual way that the doctor may not participate in regularly. So the point is that these different uses of language all exist in different settings, and because of this, they don't really mesh very well. So say, for example, if the mother wanted to all of a sudden become a doctor, she would have to learn that academic discourse, she would have to learn that medical discourse in order to participate in that professional setting. And the same can be said for the doctor. If he wanted to participate if he wanted to work in a setting that, where a mechanic would work, at an auto body shop, whatever, he would have to learn how to discuss those topics. He would have to learn how to talk about it properly. Same with mechanic to the doctor, the mechanic to the mom, whatever it may be. They have to learn those discourses in order to perform appropriately in those settings, which is essentially what discourse is. So under the umbrella of discourse, there is primary discourse and there is secondary discourse. Your primary discourse is the discourse that you use and have learned at home. Excuse me. This is the discourse that an individual learns from the time that they are born onward. Your secondary discourse is any discourse that is not an individual's primary discourse. So the discourses that you encounter later in life are the secondary discourses. So for all of us, we all have our own primary discourse, but coming into a college setting, we had to learn higher education academic discourse. In addition, as teacher candidates, we had to learn educational discourse. We had to learn how to talk like teachers. We had to learn how to discuss IEPs and how to discuss plans and how to discuss goals and objectives. That was all things that we had to learn in order to adequately participate in this setting. And now we're going to get more into kind of the politics, as the article suggests. We're going to get more of the politics of discourse. So there are power struggles between different discourses. So there's dominant discourse and non-dominant discourse. The dominant discourse carries social power and access to economic success, and that's typically the discourse that is either spoken by the majority of people, or it's the discourse that, again, that has the greater access to social power. It may not necessarily be the majority discourse, but it is how you access the services and things in that area. Non-dominant discourse is discourse that is not widely used by the population. It's at a disadvantage because it's not in settings where you can reach higher success. It's not an academic setting, it's not a professional setting. It's typically that could be like a home discourse where it's only used by that family or like a small group of people, and it's not widely used. Is the main point of that. So as stated before, a big part of this article is Delpit disputing and critiquing Guy's arguments. Guy's primary arguments, which are somewhat controversial, are those who were not born into dominant discourses will find it nearly impossible to acquire the discourse, and it cannot be overtly taught. Values differ between discourses, and these differences may cause conflicts when attempting to learn another discourse. So essentially, Guy is arguing that we as educators are unable to teach new discourses to our students, that it's nearly impossible to do that in a classroom setting. However, Delpit argues that it's totally attainable to do that with your students, to teach them a new discourse and teach them the inner workings of a discourse. And she provides an example, which I have on the PowerPoint, which is from one of her colleagues and their experience in learning discourse and how it helped them. So you can go ahead and pause the video and read through that, and then we'll continue after you've finished. Okay, so you've read that. So Delpit also touches on a lot of where other teachers' hesitation comes in teaching discourse, and she states that they appear to believe that to remain true to their ideology, their role must be to empower and politicize their most disenfranchised students by refusing to teach what Guy calls the superficial features, grammar, form, style, and so forth, of dominant discourses. So what seems to be a common fear is that we as teachers teaching a new discourse to our students are oppressing them. Those who do not already attain that dominant discourse, we're oppressing them, and we are taking away their culture, and we're taking away their home discourse. However, Delpit argues that they need this access to dominant discourses to access economic power. She also states that these discourses can be acquired in classrooms, and individuals have the ability to transform dominant discourses for liberatory purposes. So Delpit really believes that we are able to provide our students not only with that discourse education, but additionally we aren't oppressing them, that we're actually helping to further their success, and we're helping them to reach areas that they may not have been able to attain previously without that education. So something really great that Delpit does is that in the article, she goes in depth about how we as teachers can change this thinking, how we can overcome the thought of, oh, I can't teach my students a new discourse, and she really gives us specific examples of how to do that in our classroom. And I think that that's something that oftentimes we don't get in a lot of our articles that we read in a lot of these books that we read, is that we have a lot of discussion about controversial topics and what is going on in the educational setting, but we don't have that application of this is how you can do it, this is how you can implement it. So it's really great. I encourage you to read this. If you haven't read the article, please read the article. It is very, very good. However, Delpit says that we need to acknowledge and validate students' home language. We can't eliminate what is already there. We can't, wash away their language. We can't wash away their discourse. That's a part of who they are. It's so ingrained in their culture and their values and their beliefs and who they are as people. However, we have to build upon what is already there. So rather than totally deconstructing and rebuilding, we are starting at about a mid-level and then working from there and seeing where we can help and add an additional voice to their repertoire rather than taking away that voice. We're just adding an extra one, giving them an extra skill, an extra tool, something they can use. Additionally, she goes on to say that we need to change the meaning behind dominant discourse. So basically, help them to reframe the stereotypes or the racism that surrounds certain discourse to encourage and empower young students. An example of this that Delpit mentions is that an educator said to his Latino students, "You have to learn math. The mind's discovered zero. Math is in your blood." So that specific educator is helping his students to see where their heritage, their culture, has contributed to the dominant discourse so that they feel represented and they feel valid in using that dominant discourse, so they don't feel like they're out of place in using it. And finally, she says to acknowledge the unfairness between dominant and non-dominant discourse. So previously we talked about how teachers feel like they're oppressing their students by teaching the dominant discourse, and Delpit says to acknowledge that, acknowledge that yes, there is that oppression. There is, it's not fair that the dominant discourse is what provides that economic success, that provides that academic success. It's not fair. However, by having a discussion about that and helping your students to feel okay about talking about that, it helps them to see that, okay, like, they get it. My teacher realized this sucks, but they're helping me to reach my full potential. And so this validates students' feelings. And you can incorporate these discussions of oppression into your teaching, I think, relatively seamlessly, and do it as it just occurs naturally. And being open to that is what's really going to, I think, allow that growth and that development and allow students to be more susceptible to learning new discourses. And I like what Delpit says. She says in the article that we can help our students cheat. So, I like that she's framing it in a way that makes it almost like we're sticking it to the man, and so we're helping our students to cheat the system and to kind of use that discourse that has been used to oppress them in a way to liberate them and to find their voice and be able to participate in society to reach further success. So in conclusion, I just want to touch on some of the main points before we wrap up. Discourse, as a whole, there is primary and secondary discourse. As we discussed, discourse is relatively similar to a language in that in order to reach certain settings, certain success, you have to be familiar with that discourse. But it comes down, you have a primary discourse and a secondary discourse. Primary discourse is what you learn from your home, from your caretaker, whoever you grew up with. That's going to provide you with that primary discourse. And anything you encounter later in life is your secondary discourse. Within discourse, there are power struggles. So there's dominant discourse and non-dominant discourse. The dominant discourse is what provides that academic success and helps you to reach higher up. And the non-dominant discourse is spoken by a smaller group of individuals who, and they're at a disadvantage because it is that smaller group. And we're going to review what we can do as teachers. You can validate home languages, making sure not to eliminate that home language and that home discourse, but to build upon it. Change the meaning behind dominant discourses, help them to reframe what that dominant discourse can be for them, what it can do for them, and how they, as their heritage and their culture has participated in making that dominant discourse what it is. And acknowledge the oppression that the dominant discourse has created, and help your students to see the importance of learning that discourse to overcome that oppression. Finally, there are some discussion questions on the last slide. Obviously, I won't know if you read them, I won't know if you answer them, but read through them and kind of consider them and try and think about how you would answer them and how what was taught in this lecture and in the article, how you can use that in your later teaching and to better your education and to hopefully help your students reach their full potential. Thank you so much. Have a great day.